I'm Chris Sauls, and this is Thinking Thursday, a podcast for technologists and leaders who know systems alone don't scale. Relationships do. We build more than code, clouds, and frameworks. We build trust. We architect not just solutions, but the connections that make them last. Here's the truth. Every career breakthrough, every resilient team, every lasting innovation comes down to how we lead ourselves and how we relate to others at work and at home. Tech may be the backbone, but relationships are the heartbeat. This is Thinking Thursday for those who think in systems, lead with heart, and never stop growing. Hey guys, it is Chris Sauls. I am your host with Thinking Thursday, episode 17. Kind of hard to believe I've been doing this for a few months now. Today, we're going to get into the topic, something I've heard lately. I'm stuck. What do I do? I've heard this from technologists. I've heard this from friends. I've heard this from family members. And it tends to be a resonating conversation or a resonating statement is I've gotten stuck. I'm stuck in life. I don't really know where to go with this. I don't know what to do with it. And it could be of various things here. So I'm going to start with career. When I hear someone say, I'm stuck, it reminds me of a time when I was stuck. I had gone through a layoff and no joke. And I just heard someone state this the other day, that if you've sent out 1,000 resumes and you haven't had any callbacks, something's wrong with your resume. You're not getting through the filter system somehow. And today it's automated. And at that time, it was not as automated as it is today. And it was very interesting that I had sent out 1,000 resumes, had not gotten a call back, was literally stuck in a space where it seemed as if when I got laid off, somebody had called every employer in the area and it said, do not hire this guy. Do not review his resume. For whatever reason, which was untrue. It was just a moment. That's the way it felt. Went back to college, got what I would say, not a great position, but did get a position. And it was basically a 1099. It was more of a contract position of my own business. Go out and do this thing, go out and work on these networking sites. 20 of them scattered from Wilmington all the way back to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And was really not that best position in the world, but it got me back in the market. Going to school, got some certifications, got my resume updated, did a little revamp, and then the next thing you know, now I'm getting calls back, but they're still not the calls I'm looking for. So I was stuck. What do I do? I came up with this brilliant idea, and this is going to date me a bit. I said, you know what? I'm going to take and I'm going to create a video on VHS tape of my resume, of me basically explaining my resume and the things that I've done, giving the outcomes and see what happens. Made 10 videotapes, sent them to 10 employers, got called back 10 times. No one had ever videotaped their resume, which today you can do so easily. Do a video, send it to someone, and let them see you for who you are. Easy peasy, no problem, unstuck, got a job, got back to where I was at before I got laid off, really, elevated back to a position where I got a chance to, kind of step back in at where I stepped out in that particular role. How did I come up with that? I had to create a plan. I had to create a plan of where I wanted to be. I had to design in my mind, not just on paper, but in my mind, what is it that I'm really shooting for? What am I trying to do? It wasn't just to get back to where I was at, but definitely I didn't want to stay where I was. So I had to find a way, and I had to begin to think about it that way. Write the plan out. I wrote down where I wanted to be education-wise, what certifications that I want, how long was it going to take me to get them? Once I got hired, what was going to be my progression within that role? What was I aiming for? At that time, it would have been a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year plan. and really looking at it that way. Today, I really look at most technology careers 6 months, 2 years, 5 years tops. Reason why is because the market is constantly shifting. It is shifting at a rate beyond what I've ever seen. And I think anyone right now that's working in tech, if you're, if your job and if you haven't looked at your job and seen how AI, automation, how these types of things are going to disrupt your business and disrupt maybe your company's business, you are in for a rude awakening if you continue to head down that path without some guidance. So we'll wrap that. I'm going to go back and kind of put this topic back together a little bit, kind of piece it back together with, if you're stuck, there's a moment where you're going to feel like you're either in a hole and you need a ladder to get out, or there's a gap and you need to build a bridge. I know that's something that may seem so simple, need a ladder to get out, need a bridge to cross. Here is the point about both of those. If you are bridging a gap and you're building a bridge, make sure that bridge is headed to where you want it to be. Again, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years. What are you thinking you want to do? Make sure that bridge is taking you over that gap and getting you to where you want to be, not where an employer wants you to be, but where you want to be. I love corporate America for the roles that they provide because not everybody is an entrepreneur. There are a lot of entrepreneurs within corporations. That is great because those are the ones that tend to be innovators. They tend to push the envelope and they push things further along. But that building the bridge, you need to make sure you're building that bridge over the gap that you need to cover to get to that next space. Now let's talk about you're in the ditch or you're in the hole and you're getting up a ladder. Got to be real careful about how you stack that ladder. When you put that ladder up, you need to make sure it's on the wall you want to come out on. Because if you're in a hole, backwards, there's forwards, there's left and right. And where are you trying to go? Are you trying to go forward? If you are, make sure you put that ladder on that space. And there's some stories out there. There's a whole different way that that's stated about climbing ladders on the wrong walls and finding out you put a ladder on the wrong space and you're in a space that you didn't intend to be. And it's not where you want to be. So when you're stuck and you need to cover this gap or build this ladder, you've got to write it down. You've got to build a plan. And that plan has to be for you, for where you want to be. Now, if you're in a relationship, you need to make sure that you vet that plan with who you're with in your relationship. And the reason I say that, in relationships, a lot of times one individual will be taking off and growth is just happening. Personal growth, professional growth, it's just aligned and they have a plan and they're really working that plan. And their partner, on the other hand, may be out of sync. Maybe they don't even agree 100% with the plan that their partner is in. That requires discussion, that requires communications, that requires sometimes some very hard conversations of where do we want to be as a couple, as a family. Where do we want to be? Where do we want to live? How do we want to live? What kind of cars do we want? What kind of house do we want? What kind of future do we want? And that goes beyond the 6, the 2, and the 5 year. That gets into your, what I would call the 2-year, 5-year, 10-year. And what are you trying to predict? And are you writing it down? Why is it important to write it down? Writing it down solidifies it to yourself. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. Sharing it with your partner or with a friend, if you're not in a relationship, sharing it with a friend of where you want to go, it puts it into an accountability state. It starts making you be accountable to the statements that you've made and also to the steps that you're going to take to get there. Sometimes all it takes is for a friend to ask, hey, I know you talked about you were going to do X. And then when they ask you a question about it and you haven't done it, that might be a subtle prod to you. So again, If you're in the ditch, you can get a ladder, but make sure you're on the right wall when you come out. If you're crossing that gap, building that bridge, make sure that bridge is headed to where you want to go. Both cases equal out to the same thing, making sure you're headed in the right direction. Now, is career growth, personal growth, is any of that a linear straight line? No. And anybody that tries to convince you that it's a linear straight line, they are not looking at life in the right way. And there's no possible way that they've gone through a linear straight line unless they've just been absolutely blessed, which I believe people can be blessed every day, but they've been absolutely blessed without any failure. And success and failure are on every scale. It's iteration. Life is really an iterative cycle. Sometimes you got to unlearn things to relearn things. Sometimes you have to learn new things, and then you new things you learn, they change, and you got to unlearn those and then relearn something new. And if you're in technology, that is the career path. It is going to be a consistent balance of unlearning and relearning different things because it is constantly changing. And that could be technology in healthcare, technology in the power industry, technology in any particular vertical or market where technology is used. And there are very few businesses today that are not using some level of technology, either through their marketing, through their um, through their sales process and or through some means within that business. Very, very few. And honestly, I don't know any that are not. That I deal with on a regular basis that are not using some either a website, some type of sales funnel, some type of digitization in a digital technology market. Now, I talked about relationships and having having this covered in this plan. It's really important in your relationships, even in your business relationships. Your supervisor or your boss, or ever how you describe that person, your leader, they need to understand where you want to go as well. But now, this one's going to really probably, for some of you and for some of the leaders out there, it's going to ruffle some feathers, but I'm going to say it anyway. You really need to know where they're trying to get to. Because if they don't have a plan for where they want to go next, and you're in a succession rotation inside that company, like moving up the ladder, and the role that they have is the role that you desire to have at some point in time in your career. If they have no plan to move, you got a problem. So you need to know what your leader's plans are. You need to know what they're thinking. The other thing is that doesn't mean that you have to take their position, but you got to think about, what does that mean for you? Do you want to be on that team, stay there for 25, 30 years? That doesn't happen often today because technology careers, we tend to bounce around quite a bit. Maybe I'm the oddball, like every 5 to 7 years. That's kind of how it's been for my career. Make sure you understand that, but make sure they understand your plan, what you want to do. You don't want to be a threat to them because if they don't have a plan and your goal is to be in that type of position, the position that they hold, then you have to think about how that plays in your relationship with that person. In business, these relationships are critical because everybody has different desires and different aspirations. There are plenty of people out there that are steady, stable state. They just want to, I don't even want to say status quo. These people are the ones that stabilize the business. They keep the lights on. They make sure things are smooth, and they're not big proponents of change. They don't want to deal with a lot of change. They just want to keep everybody happy, keep it moving. Then you have the ones that are, I will say, more like me. We like change. We drive change. We chase it because we know that if we're not changing, the business might not have what it needs next to continue to be viable in the marketplace. And today, with the speed of what's going on in this technology evolution with AI, automation, AI agents, the agentic world, just the different ways that we have that we can work today, you got to start thinking, you got to spend some time doing that. So these relationships, having a peer relationship, someone else that you may want to, bring along with you, Having someone that inspires you, that fuels you up every day, that's on your job, that's with you, that's really helpful. If you're in a remote environment, find out what your peer teams are like. Look around, find you a peer in the other teams. Sometimes just having conversations that way will also give you more intel on how your company's operating. But building the relationships, and this also gets back to covering the gaps. When we're in business, a lot of times we will silo in a group, and a group can silo as much as a person can silo, but a group will silo. And when they do, that can be troublesome moving down the road because you can isolate yourself from the rest of the folks around you. You can become what, you can become a cog in someone else's wheel that you don't know about. You can end up being a problem as a team because you're so insular. You don't want anybody to know what you're doing, or you don't want anybody involved in it. And you just want to keep that really balanced. Again, don't want to say status quo, but that very steady, stable state space out there where, and that's not a bad thing to have steady, stable state, God, by the way, but it is bad if you're not looking at how it should be growing and what it should be moving on to or moving forward with. Isolation is never good. So that's where you can also close this gap, and that's building bridges with your peers. That should be done on a regular basis. And what if you find yourself in a group and your group is in the ditch? I had a guy tell me a story once. I was at a conference, I was at a software little, I don't even know if it was, wouldn't call it, it was like a 1 day conference on some software. And he made a comment, and he worked for a government organization. And he says, yeah, we fur lined that ditch and we got in there and we ain't planning on coming out. And it was about, moving forward with the software and with the innovations that were available within that particular software package. And, it was just funny to listen to because he's like, yeah, this is all good stuff, but we're never going to do any of it. And I'm thinking, then why are you guys here? And why are you learning about it if you're never going to do it? And if you're not going to go back and push on it to get it done, then what good is it for you to learn the stuff? So that again is, something you see often in companies. You'll find a group that they fur line their ditch. They don't want to get out of it. They're okay with it just continuing to go forward, dug down deep, and there ain't no ladder that can get them out until the right person comes along and prods them. So for leaders out there, I know I did a post yesterday. I reposted a post from Michael, a friend of mine on in the John Maxwell team or in the Maxwell leadership team. He commented about the disengagement within the workforce. We've known this for many years that the workforce has been disengaged in many ways. Corporate workforce, the larger organizations deal with this quite a bit. And it's kind of amazing to me. We had the quiet quitting, and now you have, I can't even remember the term, just recently been cracking, basically where you're cracking under the pressure and you're losing interest, and it's basically, waking up on or going to bed on Sunday night and dreading Monday morning. And you don't really want to be there, but you don't know what else you can do. You're not really sure about it. Leaders, we have to pay attention to our staff. We got to know where these things are at. These relationships they're critical to have good working relationships. I may go a little far with the idea of what that really means, but I do think you need to understand who your staff, who they are, what their hobbies are, what kind of family life they've got. If they've got kids, you don't have to ask it during the interview, because I know in the interview you can't ask these questions, but you want to know if they're married, if they're engaged, if they're dating. You just want to know these things. You don't need to know details. You just need to know what their state is. And the reason you need to know their state, maybe, like I've had staff members that, they've got family members that they take care of. They've got a sick family member. Just all of these things can occur. They got kids in college, and the kids in college are struggling. They're having that issue. But then there's also the elated part, you got families, your sons and daughters are getting married and they're, your kids are getting married, or your nephews and nieces, they're out and they're having weddings and you need to travel and go do those things. All of those things play a role in that person's life. Some of it adds stress, some of it's healthy stress, and some of it's not. If you understand a little more about them and you understand these things, you have these conversations to know this, you will have a better way of knowing their state, especially in the remote environment. In the workplace environment, when you're in a building, these things tend to come up at water cooler talk, they come up in different things. Remote work, often, maybe you don't have a water cooler channel in your Slack, or maybe you don't have a water cooler channel in your Teams. Maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. It all depends. I say you should have a water cooler channel, have a place where people can just, pull up and talk to each other, and encourage them to take some time, 5, 10 minutes. We won't get back to corporate structure inside the office because everybody will flip out with the idea that, hey, I don't know how many times I've seen this happen. People gather up, they spend 10, 15, 20 minutes. Sometimes they spend a half hour sitting at a table somewhere, having a conversation. They get into it, they talk about life, they don't have a meeting coming up, and they just sit there and they talk. They build that relationship. Now, for some people in the workplace, that's great. For others, sometimes that could be a distraction. But if you're remote, you still need that connectivity. You still need to, just have those conversations. I think it's great when people gather together and have some conversations. If you're in a remote environment, these types of things matter as well. And that's also bridging the gap, um, building a bridge in that particular space. All right, I've gone on and on here with this piece about relationships. And if you're stuck, the things that you can do. So, number one is cast yourself a vision. Cast a vision for yourself, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years. Write out a plan for where you want to be. You'll have more detail for the 6 months and less detail for the longer periods, but write it out. People talk about vision boards. Maybe you're a vision board person, maybe you're not. I think vision boards are very helpful. I think they can be a good reminder each day about what you're working for, where you're working to. When you write your plan out, every month or so, review where you're at, see what you've knocked off, see what outcomes that you've reached. Remember, it's about the outcomes, goals and things to get there. Yes. But sometimes you're going to hit a goal, sometimes you're not. Don't get stuck. Don't get stuck in the idea that if you don't hit a certain goal, that you can't still get to the outcome, because that is an iterative part of it, right? Resetting and moving forward, resetting and moving forward, iterate over those failures. You fail, go back at it, you succeed. You fail, maybe you fail again, then you figure out a way. You make that step by step to get there. Got the vision, got the plan written out, then you execute. You iterate, you revisit the plan, you continue to do that. And if you'll continue to do that, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, they will come and they will go. And you'll go a lot further in a year, 2 years than you believe or than you think you can, because you're going to think you can go a really, really, really fast process in the first 6 months to a year. But it's when that 1 year hits that you start to really see the gains. That 2 years hit, you start to really see the gains. Yes, you can get quite a ways in 90 days, 6 months, but it's the long-term strides if you keep going at it and sticking to your plan and your vision. That's what I've got for you today. It's Thinking Thursday. It was just something that was on my mind because I've heard the question lately. I'm stuck, can't find a job. I'm running into these things. If you're not using AI right now and you're looking for a job to evaluate your resume, take some time and look up prompts that will help you to better your resume. Plenty of them out there, plenty of ways to do it. Here in the near future, my goal is to have a GPT that I can share that you can actually run your resume through if you're in the technology world, that will actually help you to tailor your resume, and no hallucinations, just help you to build a resume that is you know, meets the requirements to get through all the automated systems, but also gets you in front of employers, as well as what else? You learned how to use AI because now you're using it to edit your resume. Have a good one. It's Thinking Thursday with Chris Sauls, and we'll see you next week.